got to take that lens off. All right, so we're back. Now we're gonna hop right back into it. The covering the Epstein files. Gonna give you a little rundown. If you missed part one, I didn't get to finish my coverage because I was exhausted as shit right now last night. So I decided to just go ahead and take a couple of hours of a nap and get up and just finish my coverage of the Epstein files, which we are going to dive right on into it. There's not much else to really talk about right now. Also, I am going to give a announcement. I'm going to start streaming on Kick probably later on today. I'm gonna, well, probably not today because I want to create an announcement video. I want to edit a video and I'm going to post it. I'm going to probably shoot the video as soon as I get off of here, and then I'm going to go to CapCut and I'm going to start editing the video, and then once I refine it, I'm going to post it up later on today on YouTube. Then I'm going to post it up on Rumble. I need to start getting my Rumble audience back up and my Rumble channel running again. I tried to do it yesterday, but I have to learn to work Rumble Studio. I don't know how to work Rumble Studio. That's the difficult part. So, but we're going to jump right back into it. So I'm just going to go briefly through this again. And I'm just going to skim through his Wikipedia again in case you missed part one. So Jeffrey Edward Epstein, January 20th. He was born January 20th to 1953. He died August 10th, 2019. Was a child sex offender, a serial rapist, and a human trafficker, who initially became famous for his success as a financier. He began his professional career as a teacher, hired without a degree by Donald Barr at the Dalton School. After his dismissal from the school in 1976, he entered the banking and finance sector, working at Bear Stearns in various roles before starting his own firm. Epstein cultivated an elite social circle and procured at least 1,000 underage girls, teens, and young women who were subjected to repeated rape and sexual violence by him and his associates. In 2005, police in Palm Beach, Florida, began investigating Epstein after a parent reported that he had sexually abused her 14-year-old daughter. Federal officials identified 36 girls, some as young as 14 years old, whom Epstein had allegedly sexually abused. Epstein pleaded guilty and was convicted in 2008 by a Florida state court, procuring a child for prostitution and of soliciting a prostitute. He was convicted of only these two crimes as part of a controversial plea deal agreed by the U.S. Department of Justice, Alexander Acosta, and he served almost 13 months in custody, but with extensive work release. Epstein was arrested again on July 6th, 2019 on federal charges for the sex trafficking of minors in Florida and New York. He died in his jail cell on August 10th, 2019. Barbara Sampson, the New York City medical examiner, controversially ruled that his death was a suicide by hanging. Forensic pathologist Michael Batten has disputed the ruling, and there have been significant public skepticism about the true cause of his death, resulting in conspiracy theories. In July 2025, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, issued closed-circuit television CCTV footage to support the conclusion that Epstein died by suicide in his jail cell. When the Department of Justice released the footage, approximately 2 minutes and 53 seconds of it was missing. The video was found to have been modified despite the FBI's claim that it was raw. Since Epstein's death precluded the possibility of pursuing criminal charges against him, a judge dismissed all criminal charges on August 29th, 2019. Epstein had a decades-long association with Ghislaine Maxwell, who recruited young girls for him, leading to her 2021 conviction on U.S. federal charges of sex trafficking and conspiracy for helping him procure girls, including a 14-year-old, for child sexual uh, abuse and prostitution. All right. So, according to the New York Times, Epstein made much of his fortune by providing tax and estate services to billionaires. He was a renowned social networker whose vast network included business people, royalty, politicians, and academics. His friendship with public figures including Donald Trump, Andrew Mountbatten, Winsler, Bill Clinton, Matti Marit, Crown Prince of Norway, have attached significant controversy. Documents released by the House Democratic Caucus in September 2025 showed that he maintained connections with Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Larry Summers, and Steve Bannon. In January 2026, more Epstein files released showing extensive contact with Ayub Barak, Steve Tisch, Howard Lutnick, and a couple of others. Let me go ahead and turn my light on right quick. All right, so as you can see here, I already talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I'll briefly go through it again. These are all the people that Epstein has been affiliated with, all the cohorts that he's had over the time through networking, do through his business of like being a financier who goes and pretty much covers finances for a lot of powerful people. One of his main clients was Lex Wexner, who we already confirmed this already, that Les Wexner was the reason Epstein was able to acquire all the expensive things that he's acquired over time: his townhouses, his private island, jets, cars, nice clothing, expensive dining food. You know, all of this stuff right here was coming from his job of being a financier and having a powerful client in Les Wexner, who was the reason Epstein was able to live the life that he lived. And then, of course, he was such a good networker. He would go and also have affiliation with a lot of powerful people. You know, there's photos, millions, and like there's like thousands of photos of him taking pictures with like powerful people like Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, you know, Bill Gates. You know, a lot of these types, you know, Larry Summers, Steve Bannon, you know, Howard Lutnick, who also lived right there next door to Epstein. And of course, he tried to play like, oh, I don't really know Epstein like that. Me and Epstein wasn't really that cool. Sure, you weren't, bro. Sure, you weren't. Sure, you wasn't. But the point of the matter is, when you look at all this, you look at this long extended list of people who he's been affiliated with, especially knowing that he also was close with Ehud Barak and also with Peter Thiel, who him and Epstein have both opened a company together. I think it was like a hedge fund company. They opened it together, and you know, it obviously didn't work out because, you know, up until I believe it failed because of, well, a number of reasons why it failed, because it wasn't properly like being taken care of. So, but the point, let me get back to the main point. The point of the matter is, like, Epstein, his entire life has been, you know, pretty much been put on to be this big and gigantic show of like, you know, he's fronting around like being this hip and cool guy, and it's like to be able to hang around these type of celebrities. Yeah, you got to be some cool to some degree. You have to be very well spoken, taking care of yourself, and smooth. You got to be a smooth operator to a degree. So it's very clear that looking at all this right here, and especially the list of people that he's known, yeah, he had to have some type of form of aura. He had to have some type of form of motion. There's a reason why, like right now, Epstein's blowing up right now, even in his death, and saying that the guy had motion. He had serious motion right now, even though it's a dark joke, and people are treating this like it's wrong to make jokes or whatever, especially when it comes to, you know, this Epstein topic. But it's like people are making jokes about the Holocaust right now, so you're gonna get mad about Epstein jokes right now, especially when it's already this case has already been going on for like since the 90s. Like this is not a recent thing, but you know how people are, they get their feelings hurt. Anyways, we're gonna jump into like the origin of Epstein. We watched this video yesterday, but I'm gonna replay it again for part 2, so that way, just in case people might have missed it from yesterday, I want to be able to get everyone caught up right now. I might delete part 1 from last night, and then I'm just gonna keep up part 2 as the official one.
I think we all know how the story ends. All of America's top federal authorities find no evidence of collusion or conspiracy. There was no client list, no blackmail, nothing left behind at all.
Like I said, if you missed yesterday, we're going over everything right now. We're covering the Epstein files again. This time I'm going to fully go through everything. You know, we're going to go through the files, going to go through what's in the files, going to go through what's real and what's not real. And then we're also going to take a look at some pictures at the end of Epstein, along with some of the people that he's been affiliated with that I named earlier in his Wikipedia profile.
The banker who spent his career building a mysterious fortune while he managed money for billionaire clients that probably didn't exist, while also trafficking girls to and from a private island in the Caribbean at the same time as he hosted some of the world's foremost politicians, businessmen, intellectuals, and celebrities as house guests, he had acted completely alone. It was all an unfortunate coincidence and nothing more. The story of Jeffrey Epstein faded into the past as the world kept turning.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
Or at least that's what the story would have been if there weren't already mountains and mountains of evidence of Epstein being not just a psychopath, but also at the center of a crime ring that involved the world's most powerful people, procuring victims for them to abuse together. Even now, with the federal government conflicting themselves and going back on their word in regards to his case, the controversy and mystery around Jeffrey Epstein has reached a fever pitch. Silence doesn't make it go away. It's only made the questions grow louder as people's trust in our leadership is turning to dust. But in order to understand how Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to happen, what made him the monster he was, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, before the island, before the fortunes, before the world knew his name, and we have to take a much closer look at his life and the system that enabled him. Jeffrey Epstein first appears in any public capacity in July of 1980 when he's 27 years old, but the context is very strange. There's an article I found from Cosmopolitan magazine where he was listed as Bachelor of the Month with a tiny blurb and a black and white photo next to it. It says, financial strategist Jeffrey Epstein talks only to people who make over $1 million a year. If you're a cute Texas girl, write this New York dynamo at 55 Water Street, 49th floor, New York, blah, blah, blah. Because for the first 20 years of his career, Epstein garnered only occasional and brief mentions in the press. He had no real public recognition at all in the way that most high-level bankers might. And that's because there wasn't really a sensible explanation as to how he got there in the first place. Jeffrey Edward Epstein, born in Brooklyn in 1953, was the son of 2 working-class Jewish parents who, by all accounts, were completely normal. His mother, Pauline, worked a full-time job as a teacher's assistant while raising the kids, and his father worked for the City of New York's Parks Department as a gardener. Former friends and neighbors would use words like simple, humble, and gentle when talking about Epstein's parents, his brothers, and even Jeffrey himself. One former neighbor would later write that he was a nerdy little boy. People said that he was smart, overweight, always smiling, but mostly quiet. In high school, Epstein liked algebra and calculus, and he was on the math team, but his teammates would later describe him as not sticking out all that much. But he was smart enough to graduate high school in 19...
Like I said, like the video if you're just joining in right now. Now we're going to go through the full coverage of the Epstein files and everything, what's in it, and who's been named, and what are the serious allegations against some powerful figures, and also which files look real and which files are just looking fake, of course. But before we get into that, again, like I said, I want to remind you guys right now that I'm going to start streaming on Kick real soon. I'm gonna announce it. I'm gonna make an announcement video today. I'm gonna edit it, and then I'm gonna probably drop it later on tonight, of course. I'll try to plan out a good date where I can start streaming on Kick. But anyways, like I said, we already been over everything right now. Again, I know if you watched the first one, we were probably regurgitating, but we need to really go through Jeffrey Epstein's origin story. Like I said, I just read his Wikipedia if you missed it. You know, all of everything, including up to his first and second arrest, all of who he's affiliated with, what he was accused of, well, what he was found guilty on, and all of the people that he's met over the time, and have all been implemented because of their affiliation with him. And the most recent release of the Epstein files, who have named a plethora of people. A lot of people have been named. A lot of people have serious allegations against them. Now, are these 100% fact because the files have been released? No, we do not know. We don't know until there's like a serious investigation that has been conducted by the FBI. But because the FBI is under the Trump administration, you really think there's going to be an investigation? So we don't know. We can't really make a jump to conclusion and say there was any wrongdoing from anybody until there's actually like a full-on investigation. When there's an investigation, if there ever is one, then we can really get to the bottom of like who did what and what really happened, and what was really taking place behind closed doors by a lot of these powerful figures. You know, like I said, I'm just giving like a brief overview right now of what we went over so far, so that way when we continue on, you already pretty much kind of caught up exactly of where we're at and where we need to go from here on.
1969, 2 years early, and he would then attend Cooper Union College, a very small school in Manhattan known for offering completely free tuition. He studied math there, although after 2 years he transferred to NYU, but he ended up leaving there after 3 years without any college degree at all. But within 2 months, Epstein had picked up a full-time job anyway. He'd become a high school math teacher, not just at any school, but at one of the most prestigious in Manhattan, a school for the children of the elites. The students were the children of highly paid bankers, developers, politicians, people that could afford to pay a tuition equal to $50,000 a year today. By the time he started teaching at Dalton, Epstein was almost a completely different person. Basically, as a teacher, Jeffrey Epstein was a sleazy scumbag and a bit of a disaster. In the mid-1970s, students at one of New York's most esteemed prep schools were surprised to encounter a new teacher who pushed the limits of the school's strict dress code, wandering the halls in a fur coat, gold chains, and an open shirt that exposed his chest. But it wasn't just a willingness to dress provocatively, it was how he interacted with students that left an impression on many of them for decades after. He was apparently popular among female students, as many young teachers might be, but the problem was that he not only embraced the attention, but also seemed to have chased after it. The story goes that at one point, he even started showing up at students' parties, including ones where they would have been drinking underage. But before this private school teacher in his mid-20s could ever get involved in something that might implicate him in a serious way, Epstein was fired from the Dalton School for performance issues. He simply wasn't a good teacher. But at the same time, though, he was able to move his career in a way that I could only describe as failing upwards. Because if you fast forward about 20 years, Epstein was no longer this sort of aimless college dropout who had a reputation for being a bit of a creep towards students at the school he worked at. It was almost as if Epstein would go on to become a completely, literally different person. When you look deeper at how exactly Epstein goes from this disgraced school teacher to flying a jetliner around the world while he rubs elbows with the rich and famous, the puzzle pieces don't really fit together. It would only be a few months after getting fired from the Dalton School in 1976 until Epstein found another job. Specifically, he got hired at the giant investment firm Bear Stearns as an assistant to a floor trader. And it's the second time he did that in just a couple of years. Because if he did do one thing right while working at Dalton, it was impress his students' rich and powerful parents. Specifically, he was hired off the recommendation of a student's parent he had impressed who also happened to be friends with Alan Greenberg, CEO of the bajillion-dollar Bear Stearns investment bank. Greenberg was also known for coming from a working-class background, and he liked to hire people with what he called PSD degrees: poor, smart, and desperate to be rich. Whether or not getting his foot in the door was his original goal while working at a private school, whatever it was, Epstein had launched himself up the ladder in a massive way. And it's kind of weird, but Epstein's time at this giant financial services firm, it wasn't all that different from his time as a teacher. Within just 4 years there, he gets promoted from junior assistant to limited partner, which is a pretty crazy trajectory for someone with no college degree. But then, just a year after that, he was actually asked to quit or be fired during an SEC investigation into insider trading at Bear Stearns. But for the rest of the 1980s, he would start or get involved in a strange series of businesses that, if we didn't know they existed, kind of sound made up. Probably the strangest out of everything he did during this time was Towers Financial Corporation, a collection agency that was in the business of buying consumer medical debt. While he was hired as a consultant and paid the equivalent of $69,000 a month today, the first job he was given was to start using the company as a rating vessel for corporate takeovers. In the 80s, there was this popular practice of buying a large stake in a corporation, then firing top executives, and then downsizing even further to increase the share value before selling. Basically, you take over and ruin a company just to make money from it. And their first move was to attempt to take over of a kind of old, declining airline, Pan American World Airways, in 1987. A year later, they also tried to take over Emory Air Freight. And while both attempts failed, that wasn't the problem. The problem is that they were using money they didn't actually.
If people really want to know what's who are the real gangsters and who are the real gangsters and like who the real mafia like mob, the finance department is your friend, is very much is your friend in that category, because there's nothing scarier than debt collectors, especially like people like the IRS, because like if you owe debt to the government, they are going to make you pay up one way or the other. If that means they got to ruin your life and take everything you have off the table, they are going to put you through hell till you pay up your debt. Like the finance department is like, it's like it's the word, it's like the mob of all mobs, you know. They are truly like, they're truly like the Gestapo in a way. They're not actually the Gestapo. I don't want no libtard retard to go up there and just think that they're actually like the Gestapo, where they're, but like they have that mob like mentality. You know, once you owe money to the government, you better just pay it up. You know, they don't play about that. That's one thing I can understand from the financier departments all around. When you owe debt, your best bet is to just pay it up instead of trying to avoid it or whatever, because your best bet is if you can't pay it up one way, you're going to pay it up in another way. That means you're with your freedom, and then pretty much like your Social Security is going to have to cover your debt for like pretty much the rest of your life. Especially if you earn like like if you earn like a certain amount of money, yeah, you're definitely going to be paying these people for the rest of your life. So I can see why Epstein went to that type of field and conducted himself in that type of field, because like it's a very lucrative and very, you know, it's a very financially successful career, especially if you're good at it. But the thing about Epstein was he was hired without even having the credentials and the education, and he was just pretty much just propped up and given his job just because he just knew the right people.
Have. Basically, while this company was claiming to be a debt collection agency, they'd also raised $500 million from investors while promising big returns. They used the money on private jets, fancy houses, expensive cars, and their plan for paying it all back was to attempt those crazy corporate takeovers that were supposed to make enough profit to cover everything. But then when the takeovers failed, they had nowhere to turn, no money to repay the investors, and it all fell apart. And so in 1993, Towers Financial would implode after being exposed as one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history. But when it came time for his former business partner, Stephen Hoffenberg, to be deposed and tell his side of the story in court, he didn't just throw Epstein under the bus, he basically blamed the whole thing on him. But by the time the company collapsed and was being investigated, Epstein had already been gone for 3 years. He would never be charged with anything related to Towers Financial. Meanwhile, his business partner Hoffenberg, he would spend nearly 20 years in prison. I don't think we have an exact reason why Epstein was never charged for being on the inside of one of the biggest Ponzi schemes ever. One explanation is that Hoffenberg could have been lying. His testimony during his case was considered kind of generally unreliable. He would lie about a lot of stuff, wouldn't tell the truth. Another reason is that if Epstein was never really on the record as being deeply involved in the fraud, because apparently they didn't use his name for the trades or whatever it was, it's just hearsay. You know, we can't really prove that he's involved in the scam, so it's not worth pursuing if they did have Hoffenberg right in front of them and they could just punish him. However, another person would later write that it was only because of lazy prosecution that Epstein walked away and that he was definitely involved as far as anyone can tell.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this before in the first one, so I'll go ahead and talk about this again. When it comes to like like stuff like per se like a Ponzi scheme, and when it comes to stuff like a Ponzi scheme, and you look at it like a guy like Epstein, and from what they've said about his time working in this company, that he was one of the best ones, even though technically speaking he has no experience doing this stuff. But he worked for this big giant hedge fund company, of course, and it's made to believe that since he worked for this company that was prioritizing debt, it was a debt collecting company. It also made it seem like to me that pretty much anyone that's like very much close to like the ringleader of said operation, which would be should be this guy right here, who was the in my opinion, Hoffenberg, the ringleader of the entire Ponzi scheme. It, you know, of course, how do I put this? So of course it makes it feel like pretty much everyone that's like pretty much close and tight knit affiliated with Hoffenberg. It made it seem like it makes to me personally speaking. Let me go ahead and land the plane right quick, because I'm trying to think how I could better explain this. It's it kind of makes it kind of like obvious that he was like involved because of his close affiliation with Hoffenberg, and because like he got on the company without having the experience. So it makes more sense that yes, Epstein probably was involved in a Ponzi scheme to a degree, or probably far more involved in what was originally said. But the problem was they couldn't charge Epstein because they waited 3 years after the fact. So they couldn't get this to stick on him, because they already waited 3 years to probably even try to try to charge him for anything. Where in reality, he could be able to walk then at that point, because then he's not really accused of anything, because at that point, it just seems like, hey, you could either be lying, you could be either trying to take someone else down with you, you could be just trying to make this up, because like you're already gonna face a lot of time in prison. So you would say anything. And that also applies to Epstein whenever he was going through his stuff about all of who he was affiliated with and all of who he was conducting all of his, his trafficking, and also partaking in underage sexual intercourse with minors. He didn't get a chance to even make it to trial. Like, oddly enough, he didn't get a chance to even make it to trial to testify and to let the public know exactly who was involved and who wasn't involved with him. I said this in part one, I'll say it again. He was executed, deleted. He was killed before he even made it to trial. So the fact of the matter that he was killed before he made it to trial, we don't really even know exactly what's involved. That's why I said earlier, it's important to realize and not take at face value that these files are not 100% of fact of anything. No, they have serious allegations in them that need to be further investigated, but they're not a fact of anything. So, because they're not a fact, and until we have a further investigation, we don't know what really happened at all, quite frankly. We don't know what happened. So, I sit here and say these files are absolute fact, they're not. But I don't want to get too far off the topic right now. I want to try to stay on the video, but I just wanted to talk about this exactly about why is it that Hoffenberg is trying to pin all this on Jeffrey Epstein's, because they were close too as well. So of course, if they were close, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that, hey, he will want to take him down with him. And then he was also involved in a Ponzi scheme. So.
Especially because it's well recorded that during the peak of the Towers financial scam, Epstein was physically accompanying Hoffenberg around the world on his jet. He was meeting with investors. He was with him a lot of the time. And that's because somehow,
point proven,
after walking away from a moderately high-paying consultant job and apparently having nothing to do with the hundreds of millions of dirty money they made, he somehow pops up again a couple years later, completely reinvented, like his old self never existed at all. But the idea that Epstein's career is just kind of a story about failing upwards, like I mentioned earlier, that doesn't even really explain how he ends up where he did. Yeah, a teacher at a rich private school might get hired by one of his students' rich parents, okay? But 15 years later, walking away unscathed from one of the worst financial crimes in American history. I mean, seriously, most of us probably don't remember, but Towers Financial was absolutely horrible. Even back at that point in his life, a lot of his situations sound like a conspiracy. But of course, that's only one of these really odd stories that have been told about Epstein's careers over the years that imply all these different truths about how he ended up where he did. Multiple people over the years, journalists, friends, business partners, they all recalled Epstein suggesting or hinting that he worked for an intelligence agency, although he never specified which one. But in the mid to late 80s, during the same time he was working at Towers Financial, he also worked with Adnan Khashoggi, the Saudi businessman with ties to the CIA and Mossad, who was best known for being the middleman in transferring American weapons from Israel to Iran during the Iran-Contra affair. Add on to that,
hold on 1 second. Go ahead, turn on some subtitles right quick.
In the mid to late 80s, during the same time he was working at Towers Financial, he also worked with Adnan Khashoggi, the Saudi businessman with ties to...
All right, Adnan Khashoggi, Kanashki. So Adnan Khashoggi, if you don't know this guy was he's going to talk about it a little bit, but yes, he was involved with the Iran-Contra. If you don't know what the Iran-Contra is, it was a operation, a covert operation to where the United States were funding Iran during their war with Iraq. This was during their 4-year period of like the Iran-Iraq war, where the United States was giving arms to Iran when we were supposed to not have any contact or any of friendly relationships with them because of the Iranian Revolution, which led to also the taking and capture of like U.S. diplomats who were held hostage for days upon days until we managed to finally get them out, because like the new Iranian regime wanted the Shah to be returned to Iran to stand trial for all the crimes that he committed in Iran, and we at first did not want to give him up. So some of Khomeini's students and followers stormed the U.S. Embassy in Iran at the time and took hostages of all the U.S. diplomats, which caused us even to this day to not have 100% close ties with Iran. Again, at that point, they just became an adversary, and we just always sanctioned them to hell. But to go back to the Iran-Contra scandal, so this Iran-Contra scandal happened because Ronald Reagan was well, he was exposed, I think, because of he had an affair with a woman who came out and exposed this very big scandal that happened where we were funding Iran during the war with Afghanistan because we also had because we also were funding a guerrilla group. I think this was Nicaragua, where we were funding this guerrilla group to go against the communist regime in Nicaragua at the time. I might be wrong about that last part. I'll have to fact check that again, but that's exactly what the Iran Contra was. And to know that Epstein was also played a part in that, it's just like, it just goes to show you, like, this guy was almost everywhere at the time. Like, for him to be involved in Iran, to be in some way, shape, or form, to be involved in the Iran Contra is just like, bro, what was he not involved with? Someone made a joke the other day, said that he might have been involved with 9/11. I doubt that, but it's just like, it's just funny to say.
The CIA and Mossad, who's best known for being the middleman in transferring American weapons from Israel to Iran during the Iran-Contra affair. Add on to that the fact that Epstein was later found to have a fake Austrian passport with multiple stamps from the Middle East. It only further paints a very confusing picture about Epstein's career. There just isn't...
Yeah, about that. So I'll give like a little fact check about that. So the reason why Epstein has to have a passport with a fake name, and pretty much has to have like a fake place to live, it's because of, like, there was an incident that happened back in the day where there was a plane where, I believe, I forgot exactly where it was. I'll have to fact check that right quick. Hmm. So I'm trying to find where it says about, because like there's a reason why like Jews have to have a passport with a fake name and fake identities, because of there was this incident that happened back in the day. Okay, so 1976 hijacking of Air France flight 139, which led to daring Israeli rescue mission known as Operation NTB. On June 27, 1976, terrorists hijacked the plane, separated Jewish and Israeli passengers from others, and held them in, it was in Uganda. The hijacking the hijacking in Air France flight from Tel Aviv to Paris was hijacked by two members of the Popular Front of the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP, and two from the German Revolutionary Cells. Okay, so that was the incident right there. And after that incident happened right there of this hijacking in 1976 on the Air France, at that point, Israelis were Jews in general were told to always travel with fake names in fake places of origins, and to pretty much hide their Jewish identity, because they were afraid of this incident happening again, to where they're taken hostage and they're pretty much put in a bad spot. So because of that incident right there is why Jews are reluctant, and most times actually why they change their last names. There's other reasons too, but that is one of the reasons why Jeffrey Epstein had a fake passport with a fake name. It's because, like, he wanted to hide his identity that he was Jewish. So just want to give you guys like a explanation about why is it that Jeffrey Epstein was traveling with like a fake name and a fake place of origins, is because he wanted to hide his identity.
normal, sensible conclusion to this part of Epstein's life. Even after connecting all the dots, it still doesn't make sense. He starts off by dropping out of college without getting his degree, only to get hired at a prestigious school that he then gets fired from for being a bad teacher, only to then get hired at a hugely prestigious investment firm that he also then gets fired from, only to then end up getting implicated in one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history that he somehow never faces a single charge for being involved in. Along the way, he acquires fake passports, he does business with arms dealers in the Middle East, and at the end of all of it, he's filthy rich. At every single turn, you see him get not punished, but actually rewarded for stealing, cheating, and lying. But the craziest part of all of that is that was just the beginning. In the late 80s, Epstein forms a new company, Epstein & Co., a wealth management firm where he establishes immediately that he's not going to take any clients with a net worth of under $1 billion.
It was around the time that Epstein launched Epstein & Co., his investment services company, that his life kind of just seems to completely change all over again for what feels like the 100th time in a row.
By the early 90s, he's moving like someone who's in charge of an empire. He's flying around the world in a giant jetliner. He's acquiring massive properties around the US. But at the same time, his name never shows up in Forbes. He has no public filings, no client list, no office. But to the people around him, it looks like he owns the world. By the late 90s, Epstein's doing what I could only describe as flying too close to the sun. He's friends with Donald Trump, the Prince of England, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He even buys a literal island where he would build an extravagant compound for hosting parties. But after a series of conspicuous stunts, one of
Yeah, this guy, he flew under the radar for so long. Because a guy like Epstein was pretty much behind the shadows for so long, no one knew who he was. He was just a guy that was just friends with everyone right now. He was just that guy that he was just a mutual friend of all these types of famous and rich and successful academic like people. He was friends with everyone. So you couldn't really tell all of the other stuff that was happening behind the scenes. You didn't really know what was really going on. He just seemed like a guy that just was very cool, down to earth, very smooth talker. To be able to be friends with this many top people in all the facets of life, this guy had to have some type of motion to him. He had to have some type of coolness to him. He had to have some type of hipness to him. He had to be like a smooth operator. So, but because of that is why he flew under the radar for so long, and people didn't know who he was, because he tried not to make everything public. He tried not to be a public figure. Unfortunately, that changed as time went on, because he's the more and more famous type of people that he came across and befriended. At some point, the mainstream media was going to take notice to Jeffrey Epstein and who he was.
Which was a trip to Africa on his private plane with Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey as passengers. It gets to a point where Epstein is too big to ignore. The media, the general public, people are wondering how Epstein made all this money, where he came from, what's the point of everything he does. How he got to this level of social status is yet another strange story in this never-ending list of strange stories. And a big part of it would be this very, very strange story of his connection to the Maxwell family media empire. Robert Maxwell was born Ian Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hawk. He was a media tycoon businessman with a really strange life. After the war, he changes his name to Robert Maxwell, moves to England, and gets elected into the British Parliament. But he also quickly starts building a media empire across Europe at the same time. Over a period of around 50 years, he ends up owning the Daily Mirror. He owns part of MTV in Europe, the London Daily News. At one point, he even buys the US-based Macmillan Publishers for over $2 billion in the late 80s. But throughout his life, he was also closely linked to Israeli intelligence. Point being, though, is that one of Robert Maxwell's 9 children, Ghislaine, had long been a prominent socialite in London and New York. And after her father died and the family empire collapses in the early 90s, she ends up living in Manhattan, where she would end up dating none other than Jeffrey Epstein. Notably, Ghislaine, the daughter of this internationally known billionaire spy for Israel, would become the primary link between Epstein and his powerful social network. Out of many things she would do for him, she would be the person who introduces him to Prince Andrew, Saudi royals, celebrities, politicians. Of course, Epstein.
That was pretty much his ride or die right here. Ghislaine Maxwell, that was the ride or die. This woman stuck by him at every corners of life, and even to this day, she still defends him. No matter if they both know that he's guilty of any wrongdoing, she would say he didn't do anything wrong. It takes a lot for a woman like Ghislaine Maxwell to sit there, and even though she's cooked, she's never getting out, she is still going to defend Jeffrey Epstein instead of throwing him underneath the boat to get her to save her own ass. That just goes to show you how much of a ride or die she was. And then it was alleged that they wanted to have a child, and I think she couldn't get pregnant, and then they tried to do it surrogately. I don't know how that came about, but I believe that it was one of the girls that were being manipulated and being used by Epstein and Glenn. They tried to use one of the girls, or maybe it was one or two, I believe, to surrogately have a baby for Epstein and Glenn, and then the baby would be given to Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. But unfortunately, that didn't plan out like how they wanted it to. So To this day, right now, we don't. To this day, even though she's incarcerated and she's never getting out, and she, as much as she's pleading with the Trump administration to cut her a deal to where she's able to walk, she still speaks highly and very like well supportive of Jeffrey Epstein, even in his death. You know, like I said, she has nothing to gain right now because he's gone, and then now she's like facing very serious incarceration time, and she's never really truly ever going to get out and see the light of day. She could just try to cut a deal, whatever, and just give up names. And now she's saying that no one did anything, no one did nothing, there was no wrongdoing. Jeffrey Epstein is an innocent man, as she would say. She's pretty much just trying to cut a sweet deal with the Trump administration to give her to lessen her sentence and allow her to be able to walk free, which I thought that's going to happen. This woman would say anything just to get herself out of this situation. But the point in the matter is, she was Epstein. She was the glue to Epstein, pretty much. She was like everything to him because she did everything for him. She was there for him. She rode and died for this guy. She participated in all of the pretty much criminal activity, and to the point where it's cost her freedom and her life, and it's pretty much destroyed everything. But when you look at it of how her father had passed and was taken away, you wonder why like she was like so much like fuck, I'm losing my words right now. You wonder why she was like so head over heels for Epstein. So the reason why she was so much like head over heels for Epstein is because like after her father, who was allegedly committed self-deletion, or as I like to say, he was killed, she was so head over heels for Epstein because he was there for her in her grieving like moment. And he remained in head there for her, even post of her father being gone. And oddly enough, this is going to be funny enough, he met Ghislaine Maxwell through her father, Robert Maxwell. He introduced them two together. And as many people were talked about Epstein, his ties to intelligence comes from pretty much his ties to Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell has been accused of being a triple spy for 3 different intelligence agencies, one being the Czechoslovakia, another one being the United Kingdom intelligence agency, and then also the Israeli intelligence agency, the Mossad. So he's been accused of being a triple agent over his course of his life. And it kind of makes sense in a lot of ways, especially when you look at the Israeli angle of it, to where he was given a burial in Israel, and then he was given in a eulogy. I think I might pronounce that wrong. Excuse me. He was given a eulogy. Fuck. Okay, so basically he was just pretty much just given like a proper burial, and they eulogized him in Israel, and also he was eulogized by a former prime minister who spoke very highly of him. You know, even to this day, guys like Alan Dershowitz, who's very hardcore pro-Israel, he speaks very highly of Jeffrey Epstein. He never really talks down to him, and even to this day, he never regrets representing Epstein. That just goes to show you exactly how well connected and well respected Epstein was over the course of his life. Like these guys, even today, some of these guys don't regret being his friend. Like Willie Allen, for example, he does not regret being friends with Epstein at all. He does not. He doesn't regret it at all. Quite frankly, he's even said to this day, Epstein was a good friend to him. Now, he may sit up here and says he don't agree with what Epstein did or whatever, but he refuses to talk bad about Epstein. Alan Dershowitz refuses to regret representing Epstein. You know, they were very tight-knit and very close outside of their professional relationship. They were very close on a personal relationship. So because they were business and personal friends, you know, that plays a lot of stake into it. So that just lets you, I'm just briefly going over all the people that was like really in Epstein's like inner circle, who were like really close and really good friends with him up until the end. You know, Glenn Maxwell being the one above all who was really like there for him, his on and off again girlfriend who really stood with him even after he's already been gone for years now. He's been dead for years. And she still speaks highly of him. She still said he was innocent, and she still would defend him no matter what. Because obviously she loved him, you know. She spent a lot of her time after her father had passed with Epstein and pretty much never left his side hardly. So
was already pretty well connected, but his relationship with Maxwell was pivotal in him inserting himself into the upper echelon of society.
In March of 2003, Vanity Fair journalist Vicky Ward sets out to write a profile about Jeffrey Epstein and figure out what exactly he's all about once and for all. Lately, Jeffrey Epstein's high-flying style has been drawing oohs and ahs. The bachelor financier lives in New York's largest private residence, claims to only take billionaires as clients, and flies celebrities like Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey on his Boeing 727. But Pierce's air of mystery in the picture changes.
And her point was that after peeling back his mask of mystery, something far more alarming than anticipated would be revealed. Her research led her to question the idea that Epstein made all of his money with an exclusive and private investment firm where he'd only take on billionaires as clients. She suggests that Leslie Wexner is the only client Epstein ever had, but even more than that his business isn't really how he made his money at all. What she found made it look like Epstein really wasn't a genius investor at all, but probably acquired the majority of his mysterious fortune from the Towers financial Ponzi scheme, which he was far more involved in than the official story would suggest. She essentially made him look like a fraud, a con man with no substantial investing history, hiding behind the persona of an elite financial mastermind while building up a social network to make him look a lot more sophisticated than he really was. It's even worse than what they did publish about him is what they didn't.
give me just a minute, look up something real quick. All right, just looking up something right quick. So, like I said, everything we've gone over so far is just his origin story, all of how he got his come up, and what was his early professional career like before he became the Jeffrey Epstein that all these celebrities have come to know him as, this smooth talking operator who had these nice cars, private jets, fancy big houses. And the private island, of course, his main spot where a lot of all these underage sexual intercourse with minors took place at. So that was to give you his origin story a little bit and to go over his upbringing, and then also to talk a little bit about the Maxwell, you know, his history between him and Glenn Maxwell. You know, like I mentioned before, even to this day, post his death, they're still very close. She still speaks highly of him. Still said he didn't do anything wrong. You know, he's being framed or whatever. You know, Maxwell would sit here and say anything because of how much he loves Jeffrey Epstein. That is her ride or die. That's everything to her. Now, before I get to like the National Review article we got here, because it's going to talk about the Jeffrey Epstein files right quick, I'm going to play this video right quick because I'm going to step away right for a moment. My lips are getting a little chapped, so I'm going to go unchap my lips, take a piss, and do some other personal hygiene stuff right quick. So I'll play this right now while I step away for a moment.
Okay, by the time this video gets out there, there's probably going to be even more, but with a brand new multi-million page Epstein data dump, I want to dive in and look at the most immediately damaging stuff that we have, and also talk about just how badly the government screwed up, because it is bad, like historically bad levels of incompetence. Let's start with this, because we absolutely need the context. This is Todd Blanche, former personal lawyer for Donald Trump, who is now Deputy Attorney General of the United States. On January 30th, 2026, Blanche took the stage for a massive press conference unveiling that the DOJ and the FBI would be releasing about 3.5 million pages of new Epstein files as required by congressional law. The important part is at about 4 minutes and 10 seconds in, where he discusses the redaction guidelines and bloviates at length about how strict the criteria was, how hard their staff worked on these redactions, and how nothing was being withheld on the basis of national security. If you actually listened to him and took his words at face value, which you absolutely should not do, this is the most transparent administration ever. The quality of their work is unimpeachable, and the redactions that they made were only to protect the victim information, nothing else. Sadly, that is a lie. Over the course of today's video, I'll go through a series of examples in an effort to give as comprehensive a look as I can so far for this file dump. But at the end of it all, I want everyone to consider a question. Is the current governing administration in the United States telling the truth? Here we go. Item number 1, which is actually 2 documents in this case, EFTA 01660679 and EFTA 01660651. These documents show a collection of insane allegations against Donald Trump. These come from the NTOC, National Threat Operations Center at the FBI, which is where they process and vet public tips. And some of them are very obviously marked as not credible. Others are flagged as no contact made after attempting to follow up with the caller. But here and there, you start finding that some of these reports resulted in a, quote, lead being sent to conduct interviews. Obviously, I can't comment on the authenticity of these allegations overall, but there's something else I found interesting, something far more important in my mind, that speaks to the credibility of the DOJ, the Department of Justice itself, and their decision-making when it came to these redactions. Look at these 2 documents. Separate files, sure, but not always different content. Quote, complainant was spoken to and deemed not credible. Additional research showed 3 separate blank, and then it's all redacted. However, this file isn't. The rest of the sentence says, quote, incidents involving police which requested in mandatory psychiatric evaluations, end quote. That right there, although small in a vacuum, is the very first example in a massive, massive pattern. A pattern where the DOJ is redacting things that make no sense, things that they have no legal right to withhold, and things that may in fact matter a great deal. We just don't really have the ability to know because we don't have the full picture. Example, they literally redacted the word none in this file, and you can straight up read some of the other redactions because they're not centered properly. It's a joke. Even still, keeping in mind that the goal here is to analyze everything as objectively as possible, we need to do a bit of a fact check because despite massively viral social media claims all over the place, these 2 files were not actually pulled down or deleted immediately after publication. There were some 404 errors displayed on the DOJ website briefly, but they were ultimately resolved within minutes, I think, actually, and the files are now clearly visible again. I'm not sure why that happened. The sheer amount of traffic may very well have played a part as people flooded into the directory specifically searching for those particular files, and it's entirely possible that the DOJ panicked, deleted them, and then reinstated them, like they appear to have done previously with a different batch of files, but this time I honestly see no indication of that happening. This time it feels like a genuine glitch. Do you want to know what isn't a glitch? This right here, an FD302 victim interview, which is mostly redacted, clearly protecting certain perpetrator names alongside the potential victims. But even from what we see unredacted, quote, Maxwell presented blank to Trump and they had a conversation for approximately 20 minutes. Blank was invited to Mar-a-Lago where she was given a tour by Trump with Epstein and Maxwell present. Nothing happened between blank and Trump. By the things that Maxwell said, it was made clear that blank was available. Maxwell said things like, oh, I think he likes you. Aren't you lucky? This is great, end quote. Put whatever kind of spin on that you want to. But what I see personally is a victim being presented to someone with the obvious implication that they can have her if they want her. These are very serious allegations, and they're not the only ones. The sole focus of the video, by the way, isn't just Donald Trump, so I'm not going to read all of them, but the gist of it is that there are incredibly damaging revelations about how close Trump and Epstein were so far beyond what we've been told is true, it is no longer possible to hand-wave the files away as just a Democrat hoax. Pivoting back to the first 2 documents, I also want to point out something else. In between the spreadsheets and the accusations, we have emails in August of 2025. But the thing about these emails is that here we can see that they clearly acknowledge redacting a reporter's name, who explicitly is not a victim, Anthony Sibeli, I think is how you say it, while also on one of the sheets failing to redact an actual potential victim name, Leslie McMichael, in a further display of incompetence. Like I said previously, the video isn't focused solely on Donald Trump, but we're looking at well over 5,000 mentions of his name, and that's only the searchable portions of the archive that they've indexed, which hasn't even all been released so far. Let's move on to someone else, okay? Arguably the largest individual catalyst who has been deliberately stoking speculation about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, and that is Elon Musk. Elon has long maintained his near total separation.
Yeah, Elon Musk says he didn't go to the island or he was never invited, but that actually not true. So allegedly speaking, as he's trying to run cover for this, he was actually trying to go to the island and he asked Epstein if he could be invited to any of the private parties. Oddly enough. So the allegations that Elon said that he never really was invited. And now, according to these allegations in the files, Elon Musk wrote to Epstein himself that he wanted to go to the island and he wanted to participate in some of the parties. Now, of course, Elon has tried to run cover for this and try to backtrack this email that he sent to Jeffrey Epstein himself, and say that that's not all what happened, and try to pretty much just kind of like change the tune and try to like word it in like what he actually meant. What did he say? You know, that's not true at all. I didn't ask for that. Like Elon, one thing I give Elon, he's quick to just go to X and write out his own information himself instead of just having like a lawyer write it up and then just make it like a public statement. You know. But before we get back to the video, we're going to jump into like the national review of the Epstein files, their coverage of it. So on the menu today, well, it's Groundhog. I don't really care about that. It talks about Groundhog Day. Meanwhile, the Epstein list, as in 3 million of the U.S. Department of Justice files and documents related to the infamous sex trafficker, is finally published. Plus, a special offer you won't want to miss. Read on. The U.S. Department of Justice Epstein files finally released. Let me bring this a little bit closer. You guys probably can't see because it's like... All right. So I bring it a little closer so you guys can see. So on Friday, the U.S. Department of Justice published 3 million additional pages in its efforts to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. If you don't know, this was a act that was proposed, as a bill, of course, by Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna, who wanted to get, who wanted the full transparency and the full release of the Epstein files. They put this bill forth in the Senate, then it passed and went to the House, and then it was sent off to Trump's desk to be signed. First, in order for it to actually make it to Trump's desk, they had to get the right amount of signatures for this to be passed. Then once they got the right amount of signatures, it passed and went to Trump's desk. He signed it. And then now, of course, we have the release of the Epstein files. But there came with a caveat. They released the files, but they had to redact, I would say 90%, 80% maybe, 85 maybe, of the files, because they wanted to protect the names of all those that were victims. But here's how they were able to classify what is a victim. So they classified the people that were blackmailed by Epstein as victims too. So they were able to hide their names as well. Because they were able to hide their names, they were able to classify them as victims as to why their names are not being shown in the files. It's understandable with the underage girls why their names can't be shown, because of they were taken advantage of, they were manipulated. Well, you can also apply that to the partakers in the sexual intercourse with minors. You can also apply that to them. So that's how they were able to redact their names and keep their names hidden and their identities from being seen in the public. Now, of course, now that we have the release of all the Epstein files, now we've seen all the other powerful names like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Donald Trump himself. We have Howard Lutnick, of course. We have a lot of other names that are mentioned in the files now that are very, very big names, and their names are shown. But the ones that are not public, they're rich, but they're not public figures like that, their names are not being released because they technically were taken advantage of, because it was a blackmail operation. So that's why their names are not being released. So let's go on right here, which required the department to publish all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigate materials in the DOJ's possession that relate to the investigation and prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein by December 19. You can find and search the files here. Regarding President Trump, CNN, among other responsible news organizations, were quick to emphasize that there's no public evidence that any of the allegations against Trump contained in the new documents were deemed credible by the FBI. President Donald Trump is mentioned more than 1,000 times. Well, now that's up to 5,000 times he's mentioned in the 3 million Jeffrey Epstein documents released Friday. After the president initially resisted the effort, while some of the references are being vigilant, others include newly disclosed unverified sexual assault claims against Trump, as well as fresh details about how some of Epstein's victims described their interactions with the future president. Most notably, the newly released documents contain a list of unverified assault allegations against Trump compiled by FBI officials last year. There are also FBI notes about a woman who accused Trump in a lawsuit of raping her when she was 13. And in FBI interview with one of Epstein's victims, who stated that Epstein's accomplice Glenn Maxwell once presented her to Trump at a party. Yeah, I remember the allegation that was talked about before. There's no public evidence that any of the allegations against Trump contained in the new documents were deemed credible by the FBI. And the Justice Department said on Friday that the allegations against Trump in the documents were false. Trump has long denied any wrongdoing related to Epstein or any allegations of sexual misconduct. There are also those who will argue that releasing all these documents is deeply unfair to famous, wealthy, and powerful men who had friendships with Epstein for a long period of time, but who did not commit any sexual crimes alongside him. It is key thing to remember that not all of the people that were mentioned in the files that had relationships with him, it is unfair to sit here and just accuse them automatically of doing something wrong because they were just friends with Epstein. Like, you could be friends with someone and you have done nothing wrong. Like, if your conclusion is to jump to them that they're pedos or whatever, then with PDF for YouTube. Sorry, YouTube. If you're automatically concluding that they're PDF, then you're just dumb. Because you have to actually prove for a shadow of a doubt that they actually have done something wrong. You can't just accuse them of something without actual proof. Like, the files are one thing. Actually getting further, they're not like 100% like valid evidence. They're serious allegations, of course, but they're not like valid evidence. And what real valid evidence is you have to actually prove without a shadow of doubt that there was wrongdoing on the perpetrator's part. The allegations of the files are one thing, but you have to also prove, you also have to get testimonies. You have to also get DNA forensics. You have to get a lot of other things to prove that there were some form of forced penetration, that there were some forms of manipulation, some forms of, abuse being conducted. If you don't have those things, then just listen to a file tell you that X, Y, and Z did this. It's not really gonna hold up in court too well because there's not really proof of anything. It's just an allegation being made. So, all right. So from a November 2020 U.S. Department of Justice summary of the long investigation into Epstein, the Palm Beach, Florida Police Department began investigating Jeffrey Epstein in 2005. After the parents of a 14-year-old girl complained that Epstein had paid her for a massage. Perhaps Epstein's friends and associates didn't know about that investigation. But by June 30th, 2008, they sure as hell should have known that Epstein had. Okay, well, they sure as hell should have known that Epstein had plead guilty to dependent state indictment charging felony solicitation of prostitution and pursuant to the NPA to a criminal investigation charging him with procurement of minors to engage in prostitution. We don't know if a particularly unsavory allegation about billionaire Bill Gates in the latest release of the documents is true, but we know that Gates' friendship with Epstein began in 2011, 3 years after the guilty plea, and continued until at least 2014. If you choose to begin a friendship with a guy who pleaded guilty to procuring minors to engage in prostitution, you accept the risk of damage to your reputation. If you find out that one of your friends had pleaded guilty to procuring minors to engage in prostitution, do you think you could or would maintain that friendship, or do you think you would deliberately lose his number? Even after he was taken in the first time, some people still remained close friends with Epstein because they truly believed that he didn't do anything wrong or whatever, because he was able to walk the first time because Alexander Acosta, one of the leading prosecutors at the time, let him go because it was alleged that Epstein was tied to intelligence. So at the time he didn't name said intelligence when he spoke to the media about this, but they said he was just tied to intelligence. Now, of course, as time gone on, we've already figured out exactly who was Epstein really tied to. It seems like to me he was tied up with a couple of intelligence agencies as an asset. Really, it's kind of like an unofficial way of saying he was a spy, but for the purpose of keeping it professional, we're going to just say asset. So because he was like affiliated with assets, he was an asset affiliated with intelligence agencies, he was able to walk the first time. Now they were able to build up a stronger case the second time around, and then they were able to arrest him. This time it was for good, but he wasn't able to make it to court because like he allegedly had taken his own life. And now it happened, and also, funny enough, the second time he was arrested, it happened 2 times before where he allegedly tried to take his own life. The first time he tried to do it, he was put on suicide watch. The second time, it was quote unquote successful, but there was a lot of like inconsistencies and a lot of like questions about that night, because the security officers that were watching him, they were supposed to be keeping, you know, a pretty much a very good surveillance on him to monitor and make sure nothing happens to him. Apparently they were asleep. And then the footage, you know, there's like 2 minutes missing from the footage. So we don't really have, you know, we don't have footage of like inside the cell, and we're missing 2 minutes of it from outside the cell, and the security officers that were supposed to be watching him, they were asleep. So a lot of this just raises a lot more questions about what exactly happened that night. And then, you know, a pathologist came out and straight up said that it looks like to me that this wasn't your usual self-deletion. This looks like to me this was more of like an execution, like someone got into a cell and pretty much strung him up and hung him. So a lot of this stuff is bring up a lot of like very good questions that are asked that we still haven't really been answered yet. And now knowing that he was tied to intelligence, it just kind of seems like to me this was like planned out to be, he was going to be executed. And by who, we still don't know. So it's very clear that this operation blew up, this blackmail operation blew up, and it blew up in whoever was helping Epstein, whoever was going along with Epstein's schemes. This pretty much like they looked at Epstein as being collateral damage that needed to be pretty much taken out. And of course, they were successfully able to do so. Even to this day, we still don't even have a name. We still don't even know who was involved. We still don't even still don't even understand exactly what really happened that night. So, but I want to get a little bit about this Bill Gates side of things. So him and Bill Gates became friends, of course, in 2011. And one of the things that are in the files is about Bill Gates allegedly having sexual relations with a Russian prostitute, which led to him catching a STD. Now, we can go back a little bit and realize that at the time, Epstein and his wife were having marital issues. And then those allegations of Bill Gates having affairs behind his wife's back. Now, of course, fast forward today, we all know this is to be true. They divorced because of this issue. So now that we know that Bill Gates was having marital affairs, we didn't know at the time who exactly was he having a marital affair with and what was the full context of the story, because we didn't have the full picture painted for us. Now that the files came out, and now that we've heard this story about Bill Gates having a sexual encounters with some Russian prostitutes, now we have a clear understanding of exactly if like some of Bill's infidelity that was going on, and the fact that he caught an STD. And now recently, Bill Gates' wife, who decides to sit down for an interview and talk more about this, to where she has, you know, pretty much just confirmed that this is the case, that this happened. So it's very interesting to me that, you know, Bill Gates, like his part of the file is pretty much kind of like coincides with like what we like. Let me give you guys an example of like what this is, to where this is kind of like confirmation that this actually happened. So it's been alleged in the files that he had sex with a prostitute, of course, a Russian prostitute. And then we fast forward, we know Bill Gates and his wife divorced because of his infidelity with other women. Now, this right here, you can kind of match this up together, that this actually checks out. Okay, this is actually a fact that's been proven because of where we have a real world example of it that correlates along with what's being alleged in the files. that he acquired, that he was having, you know, sexual relations with a lot of these prostitutes, and he went on. He got one from a Russian one that was alleged in the files, and then he passed it to his wife, and he was asking Epstein for medicine to treat an STD that he caught from a Russian prostitute. That correlates. So that is 100% of how you can correlate this to a real world example right there. Because if you're able to correlate what happened in the files to a real world example, then you can make the argument and say that, yes, that actually happened in the files. Like I said before, if you're able to correlate it to, say, like the fact that they had a divorce, and then Bill Gates' wife stated that the reason why the divorce is because of he can't stop having marital affairs. And then you see in the files that he was actually cheating on his wife at the time, because in the files at the time that he was having this sexual relations with this Russian prostitute, he was still married to his wife. And then he passed on an STD to his wife. His wife confirmed that in a recent interview. That is exactly how you're able to correlate, you know, an allegation with actual like evidence to back it up. So that's how you're able to back it up with a real life evidence, and then you can prove that's 100% a fact right there. I believe that actually happened. So when you actually have real strong evidence to back up the said allegation, then you have a stronger case for it being 100% a fact. This is the same thing that I could apply to everything else in the files. Okay. Now, when it comes to like the Elon Musk portion, I've spoken about this earlier, but I'll briefly go through it again. Elon Musk said he did not go to the island at all, and he was never invited. Okay, that is actually not true, according to what the emails that were leaked in the file said, that he actually was asking Epstein personally himself if or when can he attend a party at his private island. Now, Elon Musk has tried to play this off of saying that's not the case or whatever. Then he's changed his tune recently. Now he's somewhat conceded that yes, he did kind of ask Epstein to go to the island, but you know, it was for not the reasons that the files alleged to be. Now, whether or not he's telling the truth, that's left up to the FBI to conduct the investigation and to find out, you know, if this actually checks out or not. You know, like I said, I'm just an independent, you know, journalist. I'm a political commentator. So I don't know if this is not my job to really 100% fact check all of this and like do further investigation. This is for the FBI to conduct their part of the investigation. So, but like I said, the Bill Gates part, it does check out because it kind of like it correlates for like the real life like divorce and like the reason for the divorce according to Bill Gates' wife herself. That checks out. That 100% correlates with what's being alleged in the files. Mind you, up to recently, Bill Gates wanted to perceived as a trustworthy public authority on matters like climate change, vaccinations, early warning systems for detecting communicable diseases, and the alleged delicious taste of synthetic meat. While hanging around with a predatory creep doesn't automatically invalidate what Gates says about these other issues, his friendship with Epstein does change the way people look at him, which is why Gates has tried to distance himself from him. Damn, my fucking nose. Fuck, I feel like I couldn't breathe. You turn up the heat. I think it's the heat. All right, so let me go ahead and jump right back into this. So the New York Times collected a good list of public figures who said they had only brief professional interactions with Epstein, whose emails with the late financier suggest a closer and much more personal relationship with Elon Musk, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, Goldman Sachs General Counsel Catherine Rootmuller, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. I might have pronounced her name wrong. Just forgive me. New York real estate mogul Andrew Farkas, venture capitalist Peter Thiel, and Steve Titch, the co-owner of the New York Giants football team. One that stood out, a 2013 email exchange with the British billionaire Richard Bronson hinted that he too had a familiar relationship with Mr. Epstein. "It was really nice seeing you yesterday," Mr. Bronson said. Mr. Bronson wrote, adding, "Anytime you are in the area, we'll love to see you. As long as you bring your harem, as long as you bring your harem, excuse me, if I feel like I can't fucking read right now." A Bronson representative said the two had a business meeting and stressed that the women were adults and had not attended the meeting. Oh, he just meant harem in a professional sense. Got it. The world has a lot of people who are true victims of injustice. If you're a famously wealthy elite man who hung around with Jeffrey Epstein after his guilty plea to procure minors to engage in prostitution, and you feel like your reputation had been unfairly suited, you need to grab a handful from one of those big piles of cash you have lying around and use it to wipe your tears. Like I said before, this is like a lot of serious allegations right now. Especially like you could understand like these are like, it's pretty much this article is going over like all their interactions with Epstein. Like some of them have denounced him and some of them said that they don't regret their relationship with him. So it's very important to understand this, especially there's a lot of key figures in here, a lot of powerful, rich, successful financiers and academics and politicians. Epstein's had a relationship with a lot of these powerful figures over time, and it's raised a lot of questions about what was really their relationship like, because like the files only give us like a small indication of what the relationship was like, but we don't really know what the relationship was really like unless we hear the person that was friends with Epstein give their side of things and give you their statement publicly. Like Howard Lutnick just gave an interview recently to I think the New York Post about this, and he's described but he's been contradicted a lot. He's been contradicting himself a lot because according to the files, they've lived next door to each other. They were very good friends, and now Howard Lutnick's basically kind of alluding that they were not really that good of friends. Like he always thought Epstein was a creep or whatever. It's the same thing kind of like Trump. There's a lot of contradictory statements from the relationship between them and Epstein, and you just you gotta have to figure they're just gonna say anything, pretty much trying to just cover up their real relationship that they had with Epstein. It kind of like I said, it raises more questions than it answers, because public statements are one thing, and then you find documents and information that contradicts that said public statement. America's big city mayors not up to basic responsibilities. It's not quite that if you elect a Democrat, you're signing on for at least one term of poorly run government. But in one big U.S. city after another, highly touted mayors, all progressive Democrats, of course, are providing deeply subpar and deliberative services when their cities need them most. I think this is something different, because I was just reading this. Yeah, I'm just looking at this. So this is something different. So he's not talking about the Epstein files no more. So we're going to jump right back into this video right here. Now that we've pretty much read the National Review's report on the Epstein files, we pretty much have a clear indication of all the big type names, the billionaires, the successful financiers that he's had relationships with, and how that's impacted over time. And the fact that a lot of the people that were named, of course, they have to run cover and say that they weren't really affiliated with them, they weren't really that close. They have to just play it off any way they can to try to save face, because, they don't want to really want to state what was their real relationship with Epstein was like. And, it's kind of like I look at Trump's situation too. It's again, I'm not saying he's done anything wrong, but what I am saying is that a lot of the public information that he's given about his relationship with Epstein, it just doesn't seem to pan up with exactly what's being, what's being reported in other information that's come out as time goes on. Because he said that they cut off ties and friendship for like different reasons, and it's changed over time. First, they cut off ties because Epstein went to Mar-a-Lago and tried to recruit girls to join, to pretty much come work for him. And then they stopped being friends because they were bidding for like I believe actually it was like Epstein's actual island that they were bidding for. Or it was like a mansion, I believe. It was a Guardian, let me see. So it was a Guardian news article. Give me just a moment while I'm looking this up. All right, so I think I found it right here. So I want to make sure I give this information out right and I don't incorrectly say it wrong. All right, so I can't find the article. I'm about to look it up later. So I can't find the article right now. I was trying to find the article in real time. But yeah, so Trump said him and Epstein stopped being friends for years before it was revealed in a recent Guardian article that that's actually not the true. Actually, they were still very much close and still very much kept in contact. And even, I think, Epstein came and ate at the White House too, I believe. This was like during Trump's first term, but it was privately kept on the wraps, and that's why no one even knew about it. And what they really kind of like destroyed the relationship, according to this Guardian article that I read, was it was over them fighting over a bidding for like a property. I don't know if it was the island or it was like a townhouse. It was like a manor or something like I think Epstein's New York penthouse or something. I believe it was the island. That's what they were bidding over before, and that's what led to their fallout of the relationship. I'll have to find it somewhere while this video plays, so that way I could really get this right.
From Epstein. He claims that the photograph of him and Ghislaine Maxwell is just a photobomb that she perpetrated and he had no idea about it. He claims that he was invited to Epstein Island but refused, and he desperately lashes out at anyone who insinuates otherwise over the past several months. Quote, "Shame on Sky News for this utterly misleading headline. Anyone pushing this false narrative deserves complete contempt. Epstein tried to get me to go to his island and I refused, yet they named me even before Prince Andrew, who did visit." End quote. Strong words, very defensive, but it turns out that we actually have emails between Musk, Epstein, and Leslie Groff, one of Epstein's assistants, reading, quote, Elon to Epstein, "Will be in the BVI/St. Bart's area over the holidays. Is there a good time to visit?" End quote. That's a little bit curious given his proclamations that Epstein invited him to the island, but let's read on. Epstein replies, "Any day 1st to 8th. Play it by ear if you want. Always space for you." After which Elon says, "Okay, probably the 1st then." They correspond back and forth a bit longer, but anyone who reads this conversation can decidedly say with certainty that Epstein was not asking Elon to go to his island. Elon was trying to go. Oh, that's not enough? Okay, I can understand that. Some people really drank the Kool-Aid. Here's an email from Musk to Epstein after Epstein asks, how many people will you be for the heli to the island? Saying, quote, probably just Tallulah and me. Tallulah was his wife at the time. What day/night will be the wildest party on your island? End quote. Epstein tried to get me to go to his island and I refused. Okay, yeah. Ultimately, for this particular set of exchanges, it doesn't look like Elon actually attended the party in 2012 or 2013, but a couple of months later, in February, we see this thread between Musk and Epstein, seemingly indicating that Epstein was given some kind of private tour of SpaceX. Interestingly, when it comes to Epstein receiving tours of various facilities, that's not even the only example. Right here, with this email, we can look at the competence of the redaction team yet again, and it's really not good. In this particular email from March of 2014, Epstein is corresponding with an unknown redacted individual.
All right, so let me go ahead and correct the record right quick before we jump back into that. So November 2004, I was up a little ahead of time, apparently. So November 2004, Trump and Epstein sparred over an oceanfront mansion. So in 2019, Washington Post reported about a 2004 bidding war over a Palm Beach oceanfront mansion as driving a wedge between Trump and Epstein. The dispute happened months before Palm Beach police began investigating allegations that Epstein was sexually abusing minors. The mansion entered the market after a previous owner and healthcare tycoon turned philanthropist, Abraham Gossman, declared bankruptcy, Palm Beach Daily News reported. Bankruptcy court acquired the home, dubbed mansion, dubbed House of the Friendship, that's what it's called, put it on the auction block. Trump outbid Epstein, securing the 62,000 square foot mansion for $41.35 million. Before the auction, the trustee in the case, Joseph described the showdown as the two very large Palm Beach egos going at it, said Washington Post report. Okay, so that's exactly what they were bidding over. So, okay, so let me go ahead and correct the record right quick. Trump outbid Epstein and took the oceanfront beach house, which that was one of the allegations and one of the alleged by, is also being alleged by Trump, that's exactly what they had a falling out about. Was that's what ended their friendship. That was one of the allegations. The other one was him coming to Mar-a-Lago, trying to recruit female employees, trying to take away employees from Mar-a-Lago. The other one was him being very weird to teenagers when he was there at Mar-a-Lago. That was the other allegation. So we have three allegations of why Trump said that he cut off him and Epstein, stop being friends. Now, of course, you have to take this with a line of salt. We don't know which one is actually really factually true or not. We don't know. But we will say that even though they said they stopped having close ties together, it's being shown that, you know, even during Trump's first presidency, before Epstein was arrested, that they still kept in contact. And then Epstein attended the White House to have at a private dinner. So... And this wasn't reported again because, like, this was kept on the wraps. We didn't notice until this recently. But I digress. So let's jump back into it.
And yet in this next thread, document EFTA 0098580, we can see the same exact email, this time unredacted with the name Alan Jones. There is no justifiable or legal reason to be redacting that man's name. Just for the sake of really hammering this point home so that even the brain-dead fans of Elon Musk are still able to fully comprehend, let me read one more email thread before moving on to the next document. This one, December of 2012, which for clarity's sake is after Jeffrey Epstein was convicted of procuring a minor for prostitution in 2008. Quote from Epstein, "You are welcome to stay or just come for the day. Plenty of room. I will send a heli to get you." End quote. To which Elon replies, "Do you have any parties planned? I've been working to the edge of sanity this year, and so once my kids head home after Christmas, I really want to hit the party scene in St. Bart's or elsewhere and let loose. The invitation is much appreciated, but a peaceful island experience is the opposite of what I'm looking for." End quote. Still not finished, by the way. Epstein replies, "Understood. I will see you on St. Barth. The ratio on my island might make Tallulah uncomfortable." End quote. After which Elon chimes in again, quote, "Ratio is not a problem for Tallulah." End quote. Honestly, I really don't think I have to spell it out here, but this is Elon Musk asking to join the most notorious pedophile in recent history on his personal island to let loose, deliberately requesting to be there for the wildest parties. And when Epstein indicates ratio, as in a lot of young women, which might make Elon's wife uncomfortable, Elon says, "Not a problem." And this takes place years after Epstein was convicted of sex crimes. Riddle me that one, Elon fans. Side point, here's two different versions of the same exact page that the DOJ uploaded. One of them redacts Elon's email address. The other redacts metadata. Combined, you can see the full page, obviously, thus rendering all of the redactions void. And they even shouldn't have been censored in the first place. So double whammy. Amazing. Now that we're talking about billionaires, however, let's just keep talking about that precious class of person, the billionaires. Remember Bill Gates, notoriously close with Epstein for like decades? Yeah, this email right here appears to show that Gates allegedly requested antibiotics from Epstein so that he could secretly give them to Melinda after contracting an STD from Russian girls. Quote, to add insult to the injury, you then implore me to please delete the emails regarding your STD, your request that I provide you antibiotics that you can surreptitiously give to Melinda, and the description of your penis. You also made it clear to me that I am not to refer to blank, as that is another topic that must remain between the two of us. End quote. I'm just going to throw this out there. Having secrets between you and Jeffrey Epstein that have to remain between the two of you doesn't look very good. In fact, it might make some people think that you're guilty of heinous crimes. Maybe. For context, by the way, speaking to Vanity Fair in March of 2022, Melinda Gates said, quote, I did not like that he had meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. No, I made that clear to him. Then saying after meeting Epstein a single time, quote again, I regretted it the second I walked in the door. He was abhorrent. He was evil personified. My heart breaks for those women, end quote. At various times afterwards, she heavily insinuates that association with Epstein was one of the factors behind their entire divorce. And if I had to speculate here, I would say that sharing secrets with Epstein and trying to sneak her antibiotics could hypothetically have caused a marriage to crumble. Jumping over to an entirely separate but distinctly kind of related topic, theories have been circulating for many, many years that Epstein was an agent of Israeli intelligence, Mossad, and this document right here, a CHS report, confidential human source, directly claims that Donald Trump and Alan Dershowitz as well were co-opted and compromised by Israel. I think it's worth noting that confidential human source intelligence is not a public tip line. It's a cultivated agency source working directly with the FBI prior to that point in time. It's not an agent or an employee, it's a source, which doesn't necessarily mean it's true, by the way, but it's not a random phone call. This is a significantly elevated level of intelligence gathering far beyond just anonymous tips. Still, as with practically every single other document, the DOJ and the FBI, I guess, appear to be breaking the law. Looking at this right here, we can see Harry Tenosodenbio, however the fuck you say that. That name is clearly visible right here, but then redacted in the very same line. This guy is an Indonesian billionaire politician, by the way, continuing the trend of billionaires being deeply associated with Epstein, but it's difficult to emphasize just how pathetic it is to have the same name illegally redacted on one side, but left plainly visible on the other side of the same line of the same document. A child could quite literally do a better job of redacting these files. Not necessarily a billionaire, yet, I should say, but Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce appointed by Trump himself, was also visiting Epstein's island as per these files, corresponding with Leslie Groff at the time. Once again, Leslie Groff was Epstein's assistant, and this happened in 2012, despite Lutnick in 2025 saying, quote, in the 6 to 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again, referring to Epstein, after an interaction from 2005. Don't believe me? Okay, sure, that's fine. Here's the actual video. It's a whole lot worse.
And we left. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. So I was never.
See what I mean? I mean, like, it's one thing to say public statements, but then when you have information that contradicts it, it just kind of goes to show you that we don't know exactly what's really true or what's not. You know, Howard Lutnick has not been investigated at all and probably won't be. He's probably going to get immunity or whatever. But I mentioned this earlier. Again, it's like his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, he never really truly denounced Epstein. He says he's a disgusting person, of course. That's his version of saying he denounced him, whatever. But it's like, is it really kind of like a form of denouncement or whatever of what Epstein did or whatever? So, and then plus you see public information and stuff. They were very good friends too. So he's only probably saying that to try to cover his own ass. So I'm gonna be very objective when it comes to this stuff.
in the room with him socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
Oh yeah, dude. He's so bad that Howard Lutnick was directly emailing with Epstein and his assistant about going to lunch on the island in 2012, 7 years after he vowed to never be in the same room with him because he's gross. He really put his foot down on that one, didn't he? Moving on, we have Kevin Warsh, Trump's current pick to replace Jerome Powell as chairman of the Federal Reserve, who also apparently went visiting on the island for the very same party, making me wonder just how many people in the current administration were straight up friends with the guy well and truly after his conviction in 2008. However, just to reiterate one of my sort of pillar arguments here, the greatest blunder by far are the redactions. Frankly, I'm honestly baffled. They redacted a fucking Wikipedia article from 2022 about Trump. Look here, this is an archived version from the exact same time period where they took out words in the DOJ files like Italia, DC, and Stone, as in Roger Stone, despite his name appearing 7 other times in the same article. You could not possibly fuck up these redactions any worse if you literally tried to. It's straight up insane how many completely unnecessary and totally irrelevant redactions are in these files, not to mention the stuff that they just messed up or failed to do. How about this? Here's another troubling exchange. Email from Epstein to an unknown individual. Quote, "Where are you? Are you okay? I loved the torture video." To which the unknown person replies that they're in China. Epstein then says, "Hope to see you." Alarmingly, that's not even the only mention of torture, because in September of 2011, we have these emails between a man named Tancredi Marchiolo and Epstein, in which Epstein says, quote, "What would you like me to do with your friend? Do you want me to try to do her or just torture her?" Tancredi Salvatore Marchiolo, as far as I can tell, is a hedge fund guy, formerly a partner at Bremner Capital, and now potentially working at a place called Harbor V Limited as a director after using a slightly different name in the filings. Not entirely sure who this guy is, but he shows up a lot in these files directly with Epstein, like well over 1,000 mentions. Going on a bit of a tangent right now, some people may not be fully aware of the scope here. This isn't just Epstein and a few friends, and I care more about these other policies. This is a collection of the richest and most powerful people in the entire world who enabled and perpetuated the abuse for years. Here's another interesting bit. This is an email chain between Epstein and the Russian deputy economic minister at the time, Sergei Belyakov. Quote from Epstein, "How are you? I need a favor. There is a Russian girl from Moscow, blank, attempting to blackmail a group of powerful businessmen in New York. It is bad for business for everyone involved. She arrived in New York Saturday or last week staying at blank," end quote. And the reply that he gets says, quote, "Give me a few days to get information about her," followed by, "Hi, Jeffrey. Tomorrow I'm meeting with a guy who knows her / about her. If you have any details about case you have mentioned, it could help," end quote. In response, Epstein says, "Saying powerful men taking advantage of women like her, etc." And I don't know what eventually happened to this poor girl, but I really don't think that they just bought her donuts and said, "Hey, please stop." We are being told by the Trump administration with their intentionally compromised law enforcement agencies that there was no blackmail ring. Epstein was alone. There were no other prosecutable leads, no other perpetrators to investigate or involved or trafficking to anyone or by anyone, and that we should shut up and stop asking questions. The FBI director has been saying that. The attorney general has been saying that. All of his top officials are backing him when they say that there's nothing to see. Meanwhile, we have literal correspondence.
Yeah, Pam Bondi really did herself in when she went on air and said that Epstein, there was no blackmail operations and there was really nothing really going on, and pretty much just kind of like summed it up and just said that they were just trafficking these children for themselves. Like, they were not doing it for the purpose of like a blackmail operation. They were not doing it for the purpose of like intelligence. They were not doing this for the purpose of like basically holding powerful figures by the balls and making them do whatever they want at whatever point that they want. So when she went out there and said that, and it kind of like drove the irony of like, it drove the irony of a lot of people. Let's just put it like this. A lot of people were a lot of upset. A lot of people that have been researching Epstein, this Epstein file stuff for a long time. You know, it's made a lot of people like, well, it's made a lot of people sit up here and question exactly our leaders and question exactly what exactly is really going on. And or well, it's actually kind of confirmed that a lot of our leaders are corrupt and that they're going to cover up for something as big as this, where something as big as this needs to be exposed. You know, we should have far more transparency to this. We should be having investigations that are conducted into these serious allegations. The questions need to be asked, and you know, we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to get to the conclusion of like what exactly is really going on right now. Unfortunately, we cannot get to that because like the GOP would not, they would not even budge. They're not going to budge and try to even make a light of this. Even to this day, they're still downplaying all this information that's been released to the public, and they're calling this just a hoax. You know, they're saying this is not even real. So, and it's kind of disappointing. You know, it's very disappointing. So we don't know exactly, we don't know exactly what's going to happen going forward. But all I know is it's not going to be, it's not going to be to everyone's liking. I would just say that. Because, you know, looking right, you got left. People are still asking questions. They want full transparency. They want names. They want arrests. They want accountability. We can't get that because, like, the Trump administration is not going to even budge when it comes to this big stuff because they feel like they have other pressing issues. Like this right here, this Epstein file stuff. Don't get me wrong. This is important information, but then they're going to turn around and probably like start a war with Iran to distract from this information that's come out. I'm even surprised that they even put all this stuff out there and didn't redact, you know, Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, Trump's name. They allowed their names to show, but they redacted some of the other like non-public figures that were involved in this, that were very high profile and participated, but they treat them as their victims, so that way their names are not shown and they're not doxxed.
between Epstein and Russian officials about a young woman blackmailing powerful businessmen because they took advantage of her, which was the entire premise of what Epstein did. And yet, also this Tancredi Marchiolo guy, I mean, you have people corresponding with Epstein thousands of times saying that they're giving and receiving torture videos from him, right? And yet, somehow this painfully self-evident spiderweb of perpetrators and their sick, twisted social network have faced zero consequences. The Epstein files may not result in widespread accountability, okay? Dejectedly I'm accepting that fact. But the one thing that they have done is pull back the curtain for a whole lot of people on who exactly runs the world. They're not like you and me. They're fucking evil. I could go on and on and on, so for the sake of the video not being 10 hours long, here's one final critical document. If you search during the first party in the DOJ archive, you get 3 items, 1 in dataset 9 and 2 in dataset 10. This is an extremely graphic accusation against Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, alleging a victim that was only 13 years old. And each of these 3 documents has different redactions. Document 1 has address, case number, and half of the names redacted. Document 2 redacts the names, but not the address or the case number. And document 3 only redacts half of the address and the case number, but not the names. Collectively, in my view, these 3 documents perfectly exemplify the incompetence of the Epstein cover-up. All 3 of them fail, in every single conceivable sense of the word, to not only uphold the law as ordered by Congress, but also to protect personal information and the identities of potential victims, while also over-redacting the case number, with no justification, in a triple threat display of abject, complete, disgusting, and shameful failure. This administration is a corrupt, incompetent circus. Genuinely, the only thing that I can think of now is that they used an AI program to do these redactions. Unironically, I think that's like the most likely situation. Nothing else explains why random words would be redacted. Fragments of public Wikipedia articles censored, with so many duplicate documents that all have different portions removed. Everybody gets hyperbolic on YouTube. I understand that totally. But this is the most pathetic display I have ever seen from the United States government. As kids, even as young adults for that matter, people often think, well, it's a big official agency, therefore they must have at least some experts in the room. And it makes sense. Why wouldn't they? We get caught in this sort of intellectual trap of assuming that people in those positions of authority are somehow deserving of that position. By nature of them having it, they must be, right? But the sad reality is that the people running this country right now at the highest levels of government and law enforcement and civil service are fucking morons. They're corrupt, self-dealing, manipulative snakes who lie about their associations, their motives, and their history, where the only solution, in my opinion, is to jail them. I doubt it's ever going to happen, but hey, I'm allowed to dream. Documents are obviously still being released. Dataset 12 is now live, which I'm already starting to go through, and I can almost guarantee that this won't be the last time I talk about all this stuff. But for right now, that's it. Hopefully this is a little bit of a more comprehensive look at the files than a lot of other people have done so far, but yeah, that's all of it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. A special VPN deal, of course, locals on Patreon, channel memberships, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything, and have a nice night.
All right, so we're going to get to this one right here, the consequences of Epstein files. So now that we've pretty much got like all the important information about, you know, Howard Lutnick, Donald Trump, the serious allegations, the timelines, the timelines between what is being said publicly to what's being said in the files don't seem to pan out with each other, and we're getting inconsistencies between the Trump administration and what's being alleged in these files about like the relationships that Epstein's had, especially with like Trump himself, and then the serious allegation of what Trump has allegedly did with an underage minor that he had sexual relations with. And apparently, you know, a lot of people want further investigation into that. Now, of course, it's the right to take this in mind. That's not an admission of him doing anything, because we don't have investigation done, and we don't have like him proof of. That's not really proof of nothing. Again, you could look at these files. These are serious allegations, but they're not proof of anything. Okay, until this investigation done, until this is looked into by the FBI, until the investigation is conducted, we don't have proof of anything. Okay, so there's no jumping to conclusion about nothing until there's proof, further proof done. The only thing you could say that has played out exactly like how it's depicted in the files is more of like the Bill Gates side of things. I mean, yes, Bill Gates did have an affair with his wife. You know, then his wife has collaborated and went out there and said that Bill Gates did give her an STD, and from where he got the STD from was from him having sexual relations with Russian prostitutes. And this that story right there does pan out because of we have the evidence and we have testimony to go along with it. So that checks out completely.
All right, just to get something out of the way right now, I wasn't actually planning to do another video about the Epstein files right now. There's a couple other topics I'd much rather be working on, like a recent MMO game studio that got shut down and the sketchy history that the CEO had, things like that. But even if I didn't originally plan to do it, sometimes you have to make changes. And when I saw this video right here, I knew I had to make that change. This is the sitting president of the United States lying. Not that he doesn't lie constantly. He's one of the most dishonest people in the world, I would say, at this point. But let me just play it, and then we'll start talking about why it's so bad.
I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, if you look at the DOJ, they announced, they released 3 million pages. It's like this is all they're supposed to be doing. And frankly, the DOJ, I think, should just say, we have other things to do, because that whole thing's turned out, other than Bill Clinton and, Bill Gates and lots of people that there are a lot of questions about it, but nothing on me. But it was even sort of better than that, because they found that Jeffrey Epstein and this sleazebag writer named Michael Wolff were conspiring against Donald Trump to lose the election. So Epstein was conspiring with a writer for me to lose the election. So right there, you know that I had nothing to do with this guy. But yeah, it's a terrible thing. The amount of time that's being wasted. When Epstein was alive, like 10 years ago, nobody cared about it. The Democrats are pushing it. And the problem is that it's turning out to be the Democrats that were with and conspired with Epstein.
Okay, I had nothing to do with it. It's a shame how much time is being wasted. I think the DOJ should say we have other things to do, as in drop it. It's turning out to be the Democrats who were conspiring with Epstein and a whole bunch more deflections. Let's just get something straight. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee in the United States has been ramping up political pressure in an effort to get Bill and Hillary Clinton on record for depositions regarding Epstein. It's actually a very strong push, a bipartisan push, in fact, using contempt of Congress to compel their testimony. And I want to be crystal clear right now. I am 100% in favor of this. The vote was 34-8, and as of like a couple of hours ago in the scripting of this video, the Clintons have finally been forced to agree. This is fantastic, okay? It looks like we may finally get some shred of accountability for at least some people. Get them on record, force them to testify, and punish the hell out of them if they did anything wrong, which they probably did, at least in my opinion. I don't really think you're going to find a whole lot of people who disagree with that either. But having acknowledged the bipartisan scope of the problem, I think it's critically important that we also acknowledge the rat's nest, which is firmly, squarely inside the Trump administration. I'm going to truncate this next part as much as possible. Anyone who's looking for deeper descriptions of who these people are and what they do, there's a whole playlist of videos before this, which might be useful to you. But for the sake of time, I'll be avoiding a detailed backstory and simply giving job titles or general associations. Some of these points and documents are being repeated from the previous video, by the way, but I'll keep those parts as brief as possible. Here goes. Jeffrey Epstein was obviously, as everyone already knows, an extremely prolific figure in the worlds of finance and politics. During 2008 and 2009, he faced his first investigation and subsequent conviction with a charge of soliciting a minor for prostitution. But as a result of the recent document dump, we can now see the actual indictment from that time period, which is ironclad. The indictment features multiple co-conspirators, like deeply integrated co-conspirators, by the way, as well as 2 of Epstein's personal aviation companies, and it was drafted under the guidance of Florida's Southern District Attorney at the time, Alexander Acosta. He's number 1 that we're going to talk about. Inexplicably, some indications point towards this being a direct result of Epstein's major connections to various different global intelligence agencies. However, inexplicably in terms of actual proof, I should say, Alexander Acosta offered Epstein a shockingly favorable plea deal. All co-conspirators would be given total immunity, and Epstein himself ended up serving just 13 months of an 18-month community prison sentence. Alexander Acosta would later be appointed by Donald Trump as Secretary of Labor, 2017 to 2019. He resigned in shame following intense political backlash, go figure, over his handling of the Epstein case. That's number 1. Number 2, in 2016, during the first campaign of President Donald Trump, Steve Bannon was named as the chief executive officer of that campaign. After winning in 2017, Bannon was appointed chief strategist and senior counselor to the president, after which he became close with Jeffrey Epstein, who advised him on various pro-Trump media campaigns following his departure from the administration. Number 3, Elon Musk. By far the single largest donor of the 2024 election season, Elon Musk devoted almost $300 million to the election of Trump and political allies, after which he was given inside access to the federal government and was allowed to eviscerate practically every single governmental agency that was currently investigating his own companies. The resulting savings from this Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE, do not exist. Spending year over year drastically outpaced 2024 in 2025, with the deficit exploding more than it had under any previous administration ever, period. Meanwhile, as the files get released, we find out that contrary to his public statements for the past decade, Elon Musk was practically begging to attend, quote, the wildest parties on Epstein Island, while Jeffrey Epstein was given personal tours of SpaceX. Number 4, Howard Lutnick, the current United States Secretary of Commerce appointed by Donald Trump. Despite previous claims in which Lutnick adamantly asserted that after 2005 he was never in the same room as Epstein ever again, Lutnick was attending lunches on Epstein Island in 2012 with his friends, each of them, quote, having 4 children, 2 16s, 2 14s, a 13, a 12, an 11, and a 7-year-old, end quote, which is roughly 4 years after Epstein was convicted of underage sex crimes. The sitting United States Secretary of Commerce, appointed by Donald Trump, was bringing his friends, their children, and his own children to the personal pedo island of Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted of his first offense, and subsequently given a ridiculous plea deal by Trump's first pick for Secretary of Labor, which he then lied about in 2025. Number 5, Trump's current nominee for chairman of the Federal Reserve. His name also appears on Epstein Island Christmas party lists repeatedly, which are now being uncovered in the latest file dump. Number 6, Andrew Farkas. Andrew Farkas is a bit more enigmatic. He's a New York property tycoon, massively wealthy businessman, and he also co-owned a strategic marina with Jeffrey Epstein, nearby Epstein's own island, Little St. James, as he developed a 70-acre property. Andrew Farkas, who is personal friends with Donald Trump, is also invested on high-value real estate deals with Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. And most recently, the wife of Andrew Farkas' son, his son being Jonathan Farkas, and his wife's name is Somers Farkas, has been appointed by Donald Trump in 2025 as the ambassador to Malta. Her main qualifications and former job experience are marketing and modeling. Now she's a U.S. ambassador. Number 7, Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel appears in thousands of different places for the Epstein files, closely communicating with Epstein for at least 5 years prior to his death and discussing everything from policy to business to strategic investment and more. And within those documents disclosed by the United States Senate Committee on Finance, we learned that Jeffrey Epstein had $40 million, or rather gave $40 million to an investment firm created by Peter Thiel. And we also know that Peter Thiel spent around $15 million building the political career of J.D. Vance. In fact, Peter Thiel is the primary benefactor behind Vance's political rise, obviously resulting in his current post as vice fucking president for Donald Trump. Number 8, Brett Ratner, because the infection is present at every single conceivable level. How many people have heard of that new Melania movie, the one that's bombing in the box office right now despite a massive advertising, marketing, and historic theatrical campaign? Yeah, the director of that movie, the movie about the wife of the current president who says he's not involved, Brett Ratner, is also implicated in the files, pictured very clearly with young, redacted women.
Yeah, that's crazy though. So the director of the movie Melania, if you don't know, Trump, I don't know why they created this fucking thing. So there's a movie that came out recently. It's a documentary basically about like the leading up to the second Trump election. Leading up to the second Trump victory during the 2024 election run. It was the director of that movie, Brett Ratner. He was said to be in the files, and there's a picture of him right here, as you can see right here on my screen, of him with Epstein. That was crazy, bro. Like, it seems like to me it's like a tight-knit circle of all the people that were in the files. They're all also friends with each other as well. Well, at least most of the guys that were named in the files were friends with Trump. Some of these guys have pretty much cut ties off of him because of him running for president or whatever. But it's like, bro, you could just see how vast and wide this thing goes. Like, to know that a director of a recent movie that came out that involved Trump's wife is named in the files, that's crazy, bro. I don't know what to say about that. That is insane to me. I don't think anyone was expecting that. That was a shocking twist to me, even for me. That was a shocking twist.
Alongside Jeffrey Epstein. And please do keep in mind, the only redactions that they were supposed to ever use are for victims. I could go on at length. These are certainly not the only connections, but hopefully it's becoming clear that the Epstein rat's nest is permeating the Trump administration. Obviously, his network was incredibly large, and once again, I advocate that all of them be brought to justice, regardless of politics or party. But remember, the sitting president has now claimed repeatedly that there's, quote, nothing on him. He had nothing to do with this guy, and that it's turning out to be the Democrats that were with and conspired with Epstein, end quote. Let me draw your attention to something. This right here, I believe, is the third version of a lawsuit brought by Jane Doe with corroboration from Tiffany Doe operating under pseudonyms, alleging some of the most heinous acts you can possibly think of by Epstein and Trump specifically jointly together. This lawsuit is not a random tip line or a social media post or an intake form or some sort of non-corroborated anonymous statement being made by a random individual. This is sworn testimony declared under penalty of perjury with a corroborating witness explicitly detailing abuse and subsequent threats to keep that abuse quiet. Let's read item number 14, quote, I personally witnessed defendant Trump telling the plaintiff that she shouldn't ever say anything if she didn't want to disappear like the 12-year-old female Maria, and that he was capable of having her whole family killed, end quote. Operating under the alias Katie Johnson, the primary accuser sat for a filmed interview, by the way, which I'll link down below, all right? Stay with me. After the lawsuit was in motion, a press conference was set to be held where Jane Doe would speak, Jane Doe being Katie Johnson in this case, as per the files, these are the same person. Instead of that press conference happening, her lawyer took the microphone and said this.
Jane Doe was here all day. She was prepared to go forward. She has received some terrible threats, as have all the Trump accusers who I have been representing for several months. She's in great fear, and she was unable, ultimately, to do this.
Whether you do or do not believe that statement by itself in a vacuum, I think it's important to make something else clear, and that is that Donald Trump did not sue this woman. He didn't sue for slander, libel, defamation, none of it. Not anything at all. And yet, if you look at his substantial history of litigation in a more broad sense, the pattern is extremely clear. Donald Trump will sue everyone at the drop of a pin. He sues businesses, individuals, and entire government agencies. He sues you if you say things he doesn't like. He sues you if you criticize him. For fuck's sake, he'll even sue people and news agencies and establishments if they don't say enough positive things about him. Donald Trump will sue anyone and everyone if they ever cross him in any way. And yet, when this lawsuit happened, nothing, not a peep. After receiving threats,
well, here's the thing. He is recently going to sue Trevor Noah for saying that he was on Epstein Island and he's attended the island or whatever. So I kind of could see his point, but then I also could kind of see like it's kind of debunked about that now. And I feel like it's not the case. That I feel like Trump is not actually like he doesn't sue for this type of stuff, because if that's the case, he wouldn't sue Trevor Noah. He wouldn't sue Trevor Noah. And technically, Trevor Noah has committed defamation lawsuit by sitting there saying that he attended the island where Epstein was partaking in all these unsavory, disgusting sexual acts. It seems like to me that also kind of just applies to whoever Trump feels like he pretty much wants to sue. Like, I think the girl just doesn't. Again, these are serious allegations, and I could be wrong about this, but I feel like it depends on like who Trump wants to sue and who he doesn't want to sue. It also depends on like what he sues for, like for a strategic reason, not for more of like baseless allegations or whatever. Even though Trevor Noah made a baseless allegations, Trevor Noah is worth X amount of money. And technically speaking, is Trump suing him and just getting a quick win in court, or better yet, they just settle out of court and then Trevor Noah just paid Trump X amount of money just to not try to go to court. I mean, Trump sues for like strategic reasons. And then for most times, yeah, in some cases he does sue for personal reasons, but he also gets incentivized afterwards for suing. I mean, who does it at this point? You would sue somebody unless you know you're going to get some type of form of money or compensation out of it. Again, some people sue just based off of principle. Most people, in my opinion, sue for financial gain. That's just how it goes. I mean, in this type of market, in this type of economy, in this type of side of the world, in this continent, in this country, we mostly we do everything based off of capital. You know, we got to live and eat and breathe, and unfortunately, nothing's free. So.
In the canceled press conference, the lawsuit was withdrawn 2 days later. And while it's true, a withdrawn lawsuit is not proof of wrongdoing at all. Yes. No such thing.
You see what I mean? And then it's like you have to take it face value, and like we have to really have like a serious conversation. How many do we know exactly are any of these alleged victims actually credible? You know, we have to have a really good, serious conversation right now, especially when I'm about to talk about Virginia Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre was not like a credible witness, even though she has been martyred. She's been martyred to be so. She's been martyred by all the victims as to being the ringleader in trying to bring justice to this Jeffrey Epstein case. And there was really one good independent journalist who broke down why Virginia Giuffre was just not a trusted source and why she just became an unreliable witness. It's because she has a history of being like very inconsistent when it comes to a lot of the things that she said. She tends to over exaggerate a lot of what's being said. Michael Tracy was very much like very much was honed in on pretty much just getting to the bottom of this Virginia Giuffre case, pretty much, especially that one, and then there were some other ones too as well, but Virginia Giuffre was the ringleader of this, and she was made out to be the vocal point, the vocal leader of this, and she became a martyr, of course. When she took her own life, she became a martyr. So all the women that are fighting on right now to get full transparency and to get accountability, they're doing this in her name. And she even wrote a book about this. So Michael Tracy he read the book, and then he broke down her case or whatever. They just come to realize that she's just not that credible. She's just really not credible. She's not a credible source. So because she's not a credible source, that means that anything and everything she says against Epstein could not, you have to just take it with a line of salt, that maybe that's not the actual right information that she's passing along. Especially when it came to like the Alan Dershowitz allegations, that she was found out to be that majority of what she said was just not credibly holed up in court, and then it was just not found to be true. That's why Alan Dershowitz has not been arrested. She's described his body type. She's described what they've did. She's alleged what he's did or whatever, and said that he did X, Y, and Z. But when it was put in court, and when it was put in the courtroom, Alan Dershowitz was able to walk off scot-free, and like he was not found guilty on any wrongdoing. So, like I said, it's best to keep in mind that majority of these allegations are still just that. They're still just allegations. So we have to really we have to be very honest about what's really true and what's really not true. It's getting very close to 10. I'm running low on time. So what I might do, I'm going to break this up again. I'm going to probably cover the interview, and we're probably going to go over some of the files So what I'm probably gonna do, I'm probably gonna watch the rest of this, The Consequences of the Epstein Files, and we're gonna continue. We're gonna watch this one right here from CoffeeZilla, and then we're gonna cover some other stuff. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break it up. So we're gonna finish this one right here, The Consequences of the Epstein Files, and then we're gonna see the rest of this for. I'm gonna do another one because like I'm running low on time right now. Okay, so I'm just gonna break it up and I'm just gonna come back and we're just gonna cover the rest of it. I would assume I'll try to shoot for tonight. I'll probably cover the second half of this tonight because I'm running low for time.
It's not a conviction or a jury verdict or anything like that. The idea that these files have nothing on him is an asinine, dishonest, manipulative, and shameful lie. I don't feel like I should need to say this right now, but I obviously have to. Elsewhere in the world, revelations about a politician's close proximity to Jeffrey Epstein have consequences. A British politician, Peter Mandelson, has resigned from the House of Lords, facing a potential police investigation over his ties to Epstein. A national security advisor in Slovakia has just now resigned because of similar connections. And yet here, in America, the people most deeply integrated with Epstein, permeating the highest levels of our government, and the ones that lied about it, they've said for north of a decade, most of them, that they had nothing to do with this guy. They simply pretend that their name just isn't there. I'm not going to sit here and read them all. It is some really dark stuff. But there are hundreds, more like thousands of documents, victim interviews, intake forms, anonymous tips, criminal informant tips, lawsuits, and more, sworn testimony, non-sworn testimony, everything you can imagine, implicating and accusing Donald Trump in every conceivable way. He's not alone in that regard. There's material implicating a host of other high-profile businessmen and politicians, exposing long-standing associations and close personal friendships with Epstein, despite public denials. But they're not the sitting president of the United States, who fought tooth and nail personally to stop these files from ever seeing the light of day, condemning his own supporters for even daring to talk about it. Just in case anyone forgot or they're too brainwashed to ever believe it, this is now a deleted post from Donald Trump saying that the Jeffrey Epstein hoax is a scam, saying that his past supporters bought into the bullshit, and that anyone talking about the files or pushing for their release is a weakling whose support he no longer wants. That's the President of the United States of America. Ultimately, this video wasn't my plan for today. I'm working on that other MMO company project, and I much more prefer to be doing that. But seeing the president on national television whine about the fact that people are even talking about Epstein, saying that the Justice Department should move on as he misrepresents reality and pretends that there's nothing about him, and the Democrats are the ones conspiring with Epstein, I cannot stomach that. Donald Trump and a disproportionate amount of his close political personal picks and allies and his cabinet members are the ones who are really closest with Epstein. The Epstein rat's nest is the conservative MAGA party right now. Once again, to be 100% clear about this, anyone else involved, Clinton, Gates, any of the other billionaires and politicians, Democrat or otherwise, peppering the files, yes, investigate them too. But the current atmosphere of the United States isn't politically neutral objectivity. It's ideologically captured institutions. It's loyalty pledges and purity tests from all the wrong type of people. So the fact that the sitting powers in this nation are the true Epstein rat's nest, that's alarming to me. That's the type of thing that requires a vocalization and pushback from everyone else, because if we don't recognize...
Let's go back a little bit about that. Sorry about that.
Brainwashed to ever believe it. This is now a deleted post from Donald Trump saying that the Jeffrey Epstein hoax is a scam, saying that his past supporters bought into the bullshit, and that anyone talking about the files or pushing for their release is a weakling whose support he no longer wants. That's the President of the United States of America. Ultimately, this video wasn't my plan for today. I'm working on that other MMO company project, and I much more prefer to be doing that. But seeing the president on national television whine about the fact that people are even talking about Epstein, saying that the Justice Department should move on as he misrepresents reality and pretends that there's nothing about him, and the Democrats are the ones conspiring with Epstein, I cannot stomach that. Donald Trump and a disproportionate amount of his close political personal picks and allies and his cabinet members are the ones who are really closest with Epstein. The Epstein rat's nest is the conservative MAGA party right now. Once again, to be 100% clear about this, anyone else involved, Clinton, Gates, any of the other billionaires and politicians, Democrat or otherwise, peppering the files, yes, investigate them too. But the current atmosphere of the United States isn't politically neutral objectivity. It's ideologically captured institutions. It's loyalty pledges and purity tests from all the wrong type of people. So the fact that the sitting powers in this nation are the true Epstein rat's nest, that's alarming to me. That's the type of thing that requires a vocalization and pushback from everyone else, because if we don't recognize what they are and condemn it, then we're honestly complicit. That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below, a special VPN deal, locals and Patreon, channel memberships, merchandise, other stuff as well, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.
All right. So what we're going to do here from this point on, I will come back later on tonight. We're going to finish covering this Epstein stuff off right now. So we're going to finish covering it tonight. We're going to finish watching the CoffeeZilla video. We're going to cover some of what the files are. We're going to look at some of the pictures that are, because I got the J-mail right here with Jeffrey Epstein. We got some of the photos and we got the emails too along with them, and we're going to read the emails. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat Go take care of some business, and then I will come back later on tonight, and then we can just finish covering it all from there. Okay? I'll see you guys on the next one.